Hi, we are going to do a presentation today, and we're going to talk about augmentative alternative communication. I'm Colleen Fritz, and I'm here with Rhonda DeSosa. We're two of the 7 people on the assistive technology team. So I'm going to go ahead and present my screen, and we will get started. So today we're going to talk about the basics of augmentative alternative communication. And here are some of the learning objectives that we'll talk about today. We want to make sure that we define AAC. We want to talk about the user population, define universal versus prescriptive, list types of AAC materials and devices, discuss how to integrate AAC into the classroom. We'll also talk about aided language stimulation, super important, prompt hierarchy with descriptive feedback. So assistive technology is like an umbrella. And underneath that umbrella, we have augmentative alternative communication, and we also have access to the curriculum. So really the high incidence kids often fall into the access to the curriculum. Do they need speech to text, text to speech? Rhonda, maybe you can weigh in a little bit more on the access to the curriculum and other types of students that would fall into that area before we go into AAC.
So the access to the curriculum covers difficulties a student may have with handwriting or writing their assignments, reading, and computer access. So they may need an alternative form of accessing the computer, such as an adapted mouse, a touch screen Chromebook, or a touch monitor attached to a desktop computer. They may need low-tech to high-tech supports for reading and writing. So that is the other access to the curriculum piece of our assistive technology.
So today we're really going to talk about augmentative alternative communication, but your assistive technology specialist can provide you more information for those other students that fall under access to the curriculum. So, and here they are. So that's a map of Palm Beach County, and it gives you an idea of where we fall. And you'll see in the north area is Andy Lang. She's one of our newest members to our team. Then also up in the north area is Jennifer Dotson. In the kind of west and into the central area are Tina Murphy, Jamie Nisley. And I'm covering schools in the central area. Then you can see here's Rhonda and Gina Roldos, who cover the south end of the county. So we wanted to give you a definition. I have 2 definitions ready for AAC. So augmentative communication refers to the use of aids or techniques that supplement existing vocal or verbal communication skills. So these students may have some speech, but still need AAC to support them to communicate at a higher level. Some of our students, it's alternative communication. It refers to communication methods used by a person without any vocal ability. And our next definition, students who are primarily nonverbal, unintelligible, or have a limited number of words they are able to produce need some other form of communication to convey their message. AAC includes various modes such as written word, picture communication symbols, sign language, and tactile symbols. So Rhonda's going to talk a little bit about the AAC school user population.
So the school user population covers ages 3 entering pre-K up until 22 years of age. And it can be a variety of students that may need to access augmentative and alternative communication. Those students who have a speech or language impairment. And these are sometimes not the students that we immediately think of when we're looking for an augmentative system, but a student with severe apraxia who may be in a gen ed classroom and functionally unintelligible would benefit from having a form of augmentative communication to supplement their verbal speech, which may or may not be able to be interpreted by unfamiliar listeners. A very severely language impaired student also may need an augmentative system. And a lot of research has shown that those picture supports and symbols can often expand language development and result in verbal development using that system. So it's something to think about. Don't forget about your speech and language impaired students when you're considering using AAC. Students who are cognitively impaired, students with ASD, and students who are physically impaired, all of them may have some speech, limited speech, or no speech at all. A physically impaired student with cerebral palsy may not be able to speak at all and may need an alternative system of some form. Students with ASD often need the symbols and the picture supports to help them expand their language. They may be very echolalic, and sometimes AAC can help to bridge a gap between relying on a verbal model and then being able to independently verbalize using the picture symbols. So there's a wide range of students that AAC can benefit, and we wanted to make sure that we covered all of those so that you're not thinking of just maybe physically impaired students.
I think too, it's important to know before we talk about universal versus prescriptive that a number of years ago, the state of Florida came out with a directive that said that all students must have a communication system in place, by the time that they're in third grade, really when they're moving into kindergarten, there should be something in place. And we'll talk about some year-long trainings that we have available that you might want to do next school year. This year, we've already filled up our teams, but it's really important that you recognize that there's some students that may be falling through the cracks that we're missing, that we're just focusing on articulation therapy, and we're not realizing that we do need to provide them with a way to augment whatever speech that they have. So in this slide, we're talking about universal versus prescriptive. And simply universal means any strategy or material, any type of speech generating device might be used with all students. And that's the key. I've got it in purple there, all students. So just like you use visual schedules that you might be using with the whole classroom, it becomes universal because you're using it with everyone. When it becomes prescriptive, then there's been a decision made that this specific student must have their own, whether it's a communication notebook, a speech generating device, and an AAC assessment would have been conducted in order to get that prescriptive piece of equipment. So you could have for example, an iPad with touch chat as a universal device and as a prescriptive device. The only difference is in the first situation, you're using it as a teacher or a speech language pathologist tool. And in the second situation, that device belongs to that student. It's been prescribed to that student. So we're going to look at AAC materials and devices. And the first thing that I want to say is that we don't always have to start with a sophisticated device. There are so many different types of AAC materials that should be in play in the classroom. So we'll take a look and we'll move through these pretty quickly. But here is an object-based device where you can see you can put the objects on the device, which really helps the student who may have not made that connection yet, that picture symbol is representing something that they want or something they want to talk about. So the object-based allows them to be able to activate a message by touching the red or the yellow, those panels right there, to activate a message about, for instance, the dog in the picture. Picture symbols, hello, goodbye. You might have picture symbols at your door that say go out or open. You might have a picture symbol on the desk that says help. And all of this supports the students being able to have quick access to what they want to say no matter where they are in the room. So it's important to have those picture symbols available around the room too. And it usually won't be to label a desk or a chair. It's usually going to be a verb to be able to say something to someone. And picture exchange communication system, I feel like Rhonda probably has had a lot of background in the ASD classrooms and may want to go ahead and talk about the PAC system.
Picture exchange communication system is sometimes the first experience that a student has with AAC. Sometimes it's set up from home therapy or private therapy. And usually it has pages and pages of categorized words, usually nouns in a PEC system. They use picture symbols. So be careful when you're talking about a student using PECs that it's not just using picture symbols system, because PECs is an actual technique, an AAC system. And on the top, you build sentences with the pictures that are inside the little binder. So sometimes, most of the time, I was saying that, okay, usually it's for just requesting. So when you're expanding utterances, you usually move away from a PEC system into something that has more diverse words that the student can use to communicate with.
Agreed. PECs can expand to other carrier phrases like I see, but I usually have only ever seen it used with the carrier phrase I want. And it's a good way to get kids started because they're motivated by asking for what they want. Another thing could be a topical communication board. That's just a board that you would print out on a piece of paper or a piece of cardstock. That you could use for various situations. This one is for a snack time. You might have one for a morning routine or a circle time routine. So you make it based on a topic that you're talking about. So maybe you're doing the book Goldilocks and you want to have some of the vocabulary that would be from Goldilocks. But then we have core communication boards, and we've really been talking a lot about core communication in the last, I would say 10 years. I've been doing this particular job for 20 years, and I've really watched us move away from fringe vocabulary. We're going to be talking more about that in a few slides. But here's an example of a core communication board. And that is another one of the boards that you might have available in your room. A communication notebook where you're putting topical boards or core boards together, or a system together into a notebook so that the student has access to all the vocabulary that they need. Then we're beginning to get into the voice output devices. And this is a single message. A lot of you have seen this. This particular picture is of a Big Mac, and you can put a single message on it. Now, in this picture, we don't have a picture symbol. You always want to have a picture symbol right here. So maybe you have a student that needs to say, come here when they're finished with something, or I'm finished, or I need help. And you would put that picture symbol here so they could alert you of something they need. I've seen it used in morning routine where you have the message of good morning, so everybody has a chance to say good morning to one another. So that's a single message device. Here is a multiple message device, and we say static screen because you can see we're putting a paper overlay, something we've printed off of a copier, and we're putting it into the device, and the student then can say a number of things. Here, it's a lot of fringe vocabulary. You might have more of a combination of core and fringe. Then what happens next is this is also static screen, but it has multiple levels. So you can record on this particular device, which is called a communication builder, up to 7 different overlays. And also, this one happens to change grid sizes. It's a 1 button, a 2 button, a 4 button, an 8 button, or a 16 button. So it's got a little bit of versatility built into it. And then we move on to dynamic display speech generating device. And this particular picture looks like it's a picture of an iPad or a NovaChat with word power on it. And that's just an app that has a vendor-made page set ready to go. And that's this, we're moving up to the most robust will we move to an electronic device, a dynamic display speech generating device. Because when I touch something on this device, it's going to change to another page, and it's going to have multiple pages in it for you to have pretty much unlimited vocabulary available to the student. So low tech versus high tech. Some students must have some type of AAC system to participate and communicate during daily routines and lessons. And this may be a combination of low-tech materials and or low-tech and high-tech materials. And low-tech materials may be sufficient, but high-tech users must always have low-tech materials for backup and for complementary use to facilitate communication. So the idea that is if your student has a prescriptive speech generating device, for an example, an iPad with touch chat app on it, it's so important that you have a low tech backup for when the device could possibly not be working, or if you're in an area, maybe out on the playground where it's not going to work well to run around with the device. So you have to really think about these things. And Rhonda, I wanted to know if you wanted to weigh in on the low tech versus high tech and thinking about how we're going about this when we're beginning AAC implementation with students.
Yes, so I wanted to just add a little point that if you have a student that has a high-tech device, as Colleen said, you need to have low-tech available in case it's a technical device, so it can break down, the battery can run out. But the important thing I think to note is not only that those low-tech materials are available, but they're also being used frequently. Because if that device does fail and the student is now having to use the backup, if they haven't seen that backup or they haven't used it or had someone interacting with it with them, modeling using maybe the communication book that's based on their device vocabulary, they're not going to be able to switch easily and use it when they need to as a backup. So it's one thing to have those materials available, but you really need to be incorporating it and using it as well so that the student's always going to be ready to pivot to that backup if they need to. And the other point I wanted to make is with low-tech materials, you may have a classroom that has some students that are non-speaking and are using AAC because they need to, and you may have students that are verbal. I always use the AAC boards, the low-tech, with all my students, whether they were verbal or non-speaking, because the verbal students often use the picture symbols on my topic boards or communication boards as a way to expand their language, and they were good models, and they all love pointing to the picture symbols and making up those sentences. And so everyone had the same system in front of them, and it normalized it for those students who needed to use it for communicating. So it was a good peer relationship building aspect as well. And so even though you have students that may not need the picture topic board, I would just have everybody, if you have a small group or in the classroom, everybody has it in front of them. And I think that really helps build use of that system.
Which is a beautiful segue to one of our year-long courses called Multisensory Early Language Development, or MELD. And that's exactly what we do. We get them started with a 30 core board with a 90 core board on the flip, and we'll show you those slides in a little bit. But the teachers really did find that the nonverbal kids started communicating at a higher level, and the verbal kids started expanding their utterances more. And like Rhonda said, what a great model for another student is to see their buddy sitting next to them successfully use that at a higher level than they may be using it. So it's really a supportive thing in the classroom. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is in one of our AAC classrooms at Banyan, They really do a great job of combining low-tech materials and high-tech. All of the students in that class have a high-tech speech generating device, but it's interesting to watch the ones that gravitate to their low-tech materials. So each one has their own communication notebook, and it's so personal to them that they love to engage other people talking about things from that low-tech communication notebook. So you just remember that the student really, in the end, is going to be the one that leads you where they want to go and how they want to communicate in each and every situation. And there'll be situations where they want to use their dynamic display, and there'll be situations where they would prefer to use low tech. So really see that as a beautiful continuum, that we don't get to this end of the continuum and throw out the other end of the continuum. It really works well together. So let's go to our next slide, which is topical versus conversational. And basically what that is your topical pages, which we looked at one earlier where it was just about snack, or maybe it would just be about Goldilocks, versus moving towards conversational pages where you're really putting together novel utterances. And if you look, do you have picture sentence where I touch one button or I point to one picture that gives an entire thought? I need a break. I'm finished. I want that. So you have one button that says the entire thing, or one message on your manual board, versus then going to maybe the I want, or I see, I like, with different words that can be matched up to it. And then just going to picture word, where you're having everything as a singular word with a picture attached to put together an utterance. And then finally, if your student is literate, you can go right to a keyboard with word prediction and be completely novel in what you put together. But let's look at one end. It's cognitively easier at the picture sentence end. It's more difficult at the keyboard end. You have to be able to spell and write, etc. And also at the picture sentence, that's a quicker delivery. And at the keyboard end, that's a slower delivery. But there's trade-offs in everything. So I always give the example that repetitive information, if I were to lose my voice tomorrow, I would have one button that said, hi, I'm Colleen Fritz. I'm an assistive technology specialist, as opposed to typing that information out. So it's always good. Once again, you don't just go strictly to a keyboard once a student can do that. It's always good to have those quicker things ready to go, so they don't have to formulate a long sentence that they say over and over again. And here were some examples. So here's the picture sentence. If I were to put that on a communication device, a static screen communication device, when I pressed cookies, it would say, I want cookies. On the board with picture phrase, they then can say, I want, or I like. So not just I want cookies, I want pretzels, but this time I want pretzels, or I like pretzels, for example. And then here's a picture word where you can see each word is separated out. And we've added some more core words in there, so we can say more things. I want cookies, want more, open cookies, open goldfish, help, drink. You can put a number of things together in different orders to say a lot of different things when you go to that word level. So now we're going to get into core versus fringe. So we've been talking a little bit about it as we've been moving through this presentation. So when you think about it, core is very important. It's reusable across contexts. It's approximately 250 to 400 words that account for 80% of our utterances. The same across gender, age, topic, setting, disability. And I think that's pretty incredible. So if we were to transcribe everything that Rhonda and I said today during this presentation, 80% of our words would fall into that 400 core words. I think that's pretty incredible. Augmentative alternative communication would not fall into that core. That would be part of our 20% or our fringe vocabulary. So fringe vocabulary is more specific, and it's usually going to be nouns. And then the key thing is, because we're using picture representation often for our AAC users, core vocabulary does not lend itself easily to pictures. So you think about ball versus play. You can take a picture of a ball. It's difficult to take a picture of play or to have a line drawing representation play. You just have to come up with one and then stick to it. Every time you say the word play, if you have that same symbol, they'll begin to associate that symbol with that particular word. And I'm going to let Rhonda take a turn to say anything else she would like to say about core versus fringe.
Yes, core 20 years ago, a lot of times the PEX books, the communication boards, and I know when I started working in AAC 20 to 30 years ago, it was mostly requesting. We needed a way for a student to request. And so we ended up giving them pages and pages of, their favorite things, their foods, people in their world that they wanted to talk about. But we didn't really give them a way to expand language and build novel sentences. So then core came along, and it's research-based, that if we can teach core vocabulary, a word like go, a word like more, can be used across multiple contexts, whereas cookie is mostly used when you're requesting a cookie during snack. So those 80% that we use when we're having conversations with people, it's so important to teach those words to the students who are not able to speak verbally, so they can make those kinds of communication messages and not just have the function of requesting. Core takes a little more work because, as Colleen said, a lot of the symbols are abstract because they are concepts and not a physical object like a ball or an apple. So they may need a lot more modeling to learn those words, but those words will be able to transition and generalize across multiple contexts and, give them much more flexibility in what they can communicate, and many, many more communicative functions, like saying a comment that you like something rather than just wanting something, or that you don't like something. The power of being able to tell someone that you don't like a certain food, even though they've fed it to you for the last 2 weeks. We want our students to have the power to communicate what they're thinking, and we need core vocabulary in order to do that. So it's very important to keep that as a focus. We're not going to lose the fringe because we need the nouns in our lives, but we want to make sure that when we're looking at AAC and we're looking at building up communication boards and topic boards, that we include that core vocabulary, and we're always reinforcing the use of that core vocabulary.
Thank you, Rhonda. And we'll just take a second to look at some words. So take a look at all of these words, and in your mind, circle the words that are the core words. So we have apple, big, pencil, help, open, bus, want, paper. So I'll give you just a moment to take a look at that list of words and think about which one of those words are core words. And there they are. Big, help, open, want. Now, sometimes you think, well, in school, pencil and paper, bus, those are really important words. And those might be some of the really important fringe words for school that you will want to incorporate into your core fringe boards, which we can talk more about. But like Rhonda said, we won't get rid of fringe. Fringe is still very important. And especially with that brand new AAC user who hasn't quite figured out that they're talking to you through the use of these picture symbols and these communication boards. I often hear people say, they think it's just a toy. Well, in the beginning, it does take quite a bit of time before they begin to understand they're actually talking to you. And we'll talk a little bit about descriptive feedback in a few more slides that will help to reinforce for the student that they are talking to you. So aided language stimulation, and Rhonda gave us a preview of that just a moment ago when she talked about modeling. And that's what aided language stimulation is. It is a communication strategy where a communication partner teaches symbol meaning and models language by combining his, her own verbal output with selection of vocabulary on the AAC system. So we cannot assume that any student, let's say you're getting a student that's coming to a middle school and they have a prescribed communication device, we can't assume that they know everything about that device, that they can communicate fully and efficiently and effectively on that system. They still could be a relatively new user. And we just think about young kids and how long it takes them to learn language. Now we put all of this other stuff in their way. We're putting picture symbols in their way. They're not easily being able to use speech to be able to talk to someone. They have to use this extra thing in front of them, and they have to figure out, if they're not reading those words, well, what does that right green arrow mean? So there's a whole lot that goes into being able to use a communication system to communicate to other people. So we, as the communication partners who can easily read the words that are attached to those picture symbols, that's what makes it so easy for us to put language together to talk to our students. We have to do a lot of that before we'll begin to see that they're being able to give us some output back. I think I have a second definition. I do. So aided language stimulation, there will be a focus on core vocabulary. Just like Rhonda said, that's going to be a really important aspect for students to be able to create more novel utterances and to be able to talk about more than just the nouns in their environment. And also you want to think about this. You want to model at the individual's language level and kind of one-up it. So for example, if your particular student can do one word, then we're going to model two. So if they point to more, I'm going to say, oh, you want more. And I'm going to point then to the symbol want and then reinforce that they said more. You want more. So I'm going to up it. If they're saying want more, then I'm going to up it from there and say, oh, you're telling me I want more. So I'm going to up it to 3, so on and so forth. So you continue to just be one step ahead of them in the model. You also really want to slow down when you point to a picture communication symbol word. You don't want to go so fast that they never see anything. And you also want to highlight the word. So you want to take your time. If the word is go, it's time to go and just take a moment, not a long time, but just slow down when you get to that word so that they can see that you've said it and you've pointed to it. And then pause for your student to have time to comment. We don't give kids a lot of time before we expect them to do something or say something. And we tend to make kids prompt dependent because we're not willing to wait. And it can become really uncomfortable for you and for them. And you want it to be uncomfortable because that's what makes people talk. So if I say something like, hello, and I pause that long, that student's going to start to feel uncomfortable and is going to then try to figure out what they can do next in order to keep that conversation going. I'm going to take a moment now for Rhonda to weigh in on this as well.
Thank you, Colleen. Just a couple of things I wanted to add in here. When we're modeling at the individual's language level, and in response to something that maybe they've used either on their excuse me, speech generating device or on a communication board, you're going to expand that and model that extra word. But also, it's very important when we're first starting out with AAC in any kind of system is to model without expectation that they're necessarily going to immediately get it, and that you've modeled how to say, I want cookie or want cookie, and that the next time they need a cookie, they're going to know how to do that. I think we need to remember that they need multiple models, and every student is going to be different on how many models they're going to need before that clicks and they're like, oh, I've seen them in context during snack time point to want cookie to say, okay, now it's time for everyone to see what they want. I want a cookie, and I'm pointing to the pictures to model. That's how I would use this system to request a cookie. And over time, then you do the pause when it's their turn. Say, oh, what do you want to tell me? Do you have anything you want to have for snack? And give that pause time for them to then think, oh, I've seen Miss Rhonda do that a bunch of times. Oh, I know, I can point to cookie. And then you would expand and say, oh, you said you want a cookie. So I think it's important to remember that in the beginning, and if you're adding new vocabulary, even if a student has been using AAC and you're adding new concepts or new vocabulary or symbols, remember that you're going to be modeling without an expectation of them immediately starting to use that vocabulary or that system for a while. And the pause, as Colleen said, is so difficult to do. It's one of the hardest things for people to learn and to do. So be patient with yourself. But just, I think we say count in your head for 5, like a count of 5 as a minimum. And just remember that every time you prompt, that student is having to process what you said, even if it's an open-ended, what do you want to tell me? They're processing, they want me to say something. Then they have to look for that symbol, think about what they want to respond, find the symbol on whatever system they're using. And then sometimes motorically, it may take them a little bit to activate and point to something or choose a picture on a PIX. So that whole process takes time. And when you re-prompt, you're starting that process over. So I've had situations over time where a teacher may say to me, they just sit and do nothing, especially with ASD. So they may say, oh, he just sits, he never tries to use his book. He doesn't want to use it. He doesn't ever use it. But when I observe, I find they're saying, what do you want? Tell me what you want. Did you want a cookie? Can you tell me? Can you use your book? Use your board. So every single time they've prompted, that's a different thing that child has to start processing in order to think about how I'm going to respond, what I'm going to respond, and use their system to do it. So in a way, that student is looking like they're not responsive because they're resetting every time a new prompt comes in. Oh, that's a new one. Oh, another one. Oh, I have to think about that one now. So it may look like the student is not responsive, but really they're just trying to keep up with the prompts that are coming. So pausing is so important for students that have any kind of cognitive language disorder as well. Any type of difficulty processing that information, they need time to think about it and be able to respond. And it's super uncomfortable for us, but it's like one of the most important things, I think, in terms of AAC.
Agreed. So what this slide is doing is it's showing you a 90 core board, and on another slide we'll show this in bigger so that you can possibly read some of the words. But it's just showing you during playtime or personal care, mealtime or community, how many different sentences you can put together using this board to talk to your student and be able to say something. There are so many different phrases here. So I want to play. And you'll notice the color coding too. And I color coded it here. And of course it is color coded on the communication board. So what we're doing is we're using a Fitzgerald key, which means we're moving from left to right to build sentences. We have our people words on our left, and they're yellow. And we have some of our things, they're orange. Then we move into our green words, which are our action words. Our pink words can be conjunctions, prepositions. We call them our little words. Then we move over here to the blue words, and they're descriptive words. So adjectives or adverbs. There's even some nouns that fall into this category that kind of like time words and things like that, like the words today and yesterday. Some different words fall into this blue category. Here are purple words, which are places. You see here and there. And then we have our question words, which are in gray. So a very specific color coding system that supports your student putting language together, but it also supports you as you're trying to get used to where are all of these words? Well, I know it's an action word, so I'm going to look right to the green first. So I think it helps the adult as well. And here's another poster, and this poster is available. If anybody wants one of these posters, just email me or Rhonda or your AT specialist. We can make more copies of these. I have one behind me, but you can't see it because, of course, my head is right there blocking it. But this is something that you can hang up in your room, and it's the same type of thing. Play, calendar, arrival, departure, all of these different things that happen during the day. And it reminds you how many different things that you can say using your core boards. So here is the 30 core board. And once again, you can see that it's left to right, your yellow, green, your pink, your blue words. Maybe hard to tell on this slide, but these are purple and that is gray. And these are the top 30. So at some point in time, I looked at the research and I picked a particular research article that showed the top 8, then 15, then 30 words that they first looked at. What do toddlers start using right away? And then they applied it to AAC users, and they came up with lists of words. Like I said, top 8, top 15, top 30, top 50, top 100. So we put together a 30 core board a number of years ago and chose this particular color coding system. And we've done pretty well to keep it consistent across the district. So that's been helpful too. So that if a student moves from one classroom to the next, they're going to see the same type of thing. So that's the 30. This is the 90 core board. And if you notice, the borders around some of these are very thick. Those are the original 30. Because also what you're trying to do when you're working with students that use augmentative communication is you want to keep the words in the same place so that when they go to another board, they can, just like we do on our phones. When you're typing on your phone, or if you're a touch typist, you know where those keys are. So if somebody moves those keys into a different position, you're not going to type as fast, or you're going to have to start looking at the keyboard to be able to type. It's the same type of thing. A lot of our students learn where the particular message or the button or the word is more than they learn what the symbol is or what the word is. So that is really important that we pay attention to the fact that we're trying to keep the symbols consistent, the location consistent, the color coding consistent. We want to make it as easy for them as we possibly can. This is not a test. This is an expressive language. And I'll just take a moment right now to say, if you're trying to test comprehension, then get 3 picture symbols like you would do on the FSAA and just put the 3 picture symbols out and have them receptively identify whatever you're looking for. But when you're working with communication and expressive language, you want to accept anything that they say. So if you were looking for them to say the word little and they say the word same, figure out why the word same can fit into the context of what you're talking about. You want to not be the person that is try again or that's not right, but more of we're having a conversation. And in a conversation, I could say hello to somebody and they could say, I don't even want to talk to you, instead of saying hello back to me. So we have to kind of accept what it is they're saying. And oftentimes they have no idea. They just randomly point to something. We'll go with it so that they can begin to see the power of communication. So aided language stimulation, once again, is when I'm going to say, oh, it's time to go to lunch. Let's go. Everybody line up at the door. Then at the door, if you have a go symbol on your door, you can point to it again. Let's go. Something else that you can do, the word like comes up a lot. Oh, I like how you're sitting in your seat. I like this story. It's really funny. So I'm just right at this point highlighting one word at a time. It's morning time, or somebody new comes into your classroom. Oh, hello. How are you today? It's important to say hello to people when they come into the classroom. Other examples. Rhonda, have you got some more examples that you like to key into?
In the classroom, you may use the phrase put on. If everyone has to put their lunch boxes on the table or put their work away. So put is also another useful word that you may find happens frequently. You want to try and target when you're first starting to use aided language, the ones that have a high frequency, so that you're going to use them throughout the day. Now, core words are high frequency. You are going to use them all day, but sometimes in a classroom, there are words that happen a lot more frequently than others. You may be saying, maybe your student indicates by pointing to all done that they want to be finished. And then you can say, oh, you're telling me you're all done, but it's time to do some more, and then we'll be all done. So then you can use that communication board to communicate that concept to them again. So just think about words that happen throughout the day, and then you'll find that this core board has a lot of words that happen with high frequency during the school day. Let's line up who's going to be first. There's as you look over this board, and if you request these boards from us, you'll find that there are words that happen that you can easily incorporate into your day and just use them to point to help those students learn how they can then communicate those messages.
I like to also, when you're going over, if you go over your schedule first thing in the morning, first we'll do circle time. Next, we'll do math. Next, we'll do art, or whatever it will be. Last, we'll do cleanup. Excuse me for coughing. Another thing that I talked about before was making sure that you go slow enough. So, for example, I've seen people that will say, we need to go there. And if you see my red cursor on the word go, I just said, we need to go there. So I said 5 words while pointing to one word. And that's one that takes practice, because you want to remember, once you've pointed to it and said it, to take your finger away, your pointer tool away, or whatever you're using to be able to point to that. So we need to get ready to go to lunch. So that's another thing about, as you're doing aided language stimulation, you want to slow it down. And if your kids are beyond that one word and you're beginning to combine 2 words, so once again, we need to get ready to go to lunch. So taking a little bit more time with the word we and a little bit more time with the word go, and then making sure that I point away or off the board when I'm finished saying that word. Otherwise, they won't know what word that stood for. So that's another important point to think about. So the other thing that we look at is the prompt hierarchy. We've been talking a little bit about it already, but a prompt hierarchy is a system of queuing, and when implemented, allows an AAC user the opportunity to communicate or follow a set of instructions as independently as possible. And when we're looking at communication, we're looking at least to most prompt hierarchy in just about every situation. And this prompting system starts with 0 prompts, no prompt, natural prompt, whatever, or an environmental cue, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then introduces the least restrictive prompt after no response is received from the student. And if you still get no response, then another prompt is added as you move down that prompt hierarchy. I will say that hand over hand is a prompt that we will not use. You might end up using a shoulder tap or an elbow tap as a physical prompt, but not take the hand over hand, because then it just becomes a physical act as opposed to an expressive act. So I wanted to show you one of the charts that we use for least to most prompt hierarchy, which also will let me speak a moment about another year-long training that we have, which is called Environmental Communication Teaching, ECT. And it really focuses in on increasing the number of communication opportunities during the school day for targeted students, and really look specifically at how we can increase the number of opportunities they have, and also at the same time expand what they're able to say. So when we look at this, step 1, environmental cue or natural cue. So what is that? It could be when you put the food out on a table, or you bring all the food in getting ready for breakfast time or for lunch time or snack time. That's an environmental cue. That kind of lets you know when I'm at home, if, for my husband, when I start getting in the kitchen and he can smell the food and he starts hearing me clank the plates and everything, that's his environmental cue that we're going to be having dinner soon. A natural cue that you might add to that environmental cue would be, oh, it's time for snack. Then comes that pause, and Rhonda said 5 seconds. Well, and it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's more like 1001, 1002. So it's a slow count, and you focus your attention on the students or student, and it's like time for snack. Okay, how many people felt really uncomfortable? And you do feel uncomfortable because somebody is waiting for you to respond to them or for possibly to say something. So if you give that total pause time with that focus on your student, then step 2, ask an open question, which might be, what do you want? Or it might be, what could you say? Once again, you're going to give that full 5-second pause before you go to that partial prompt. And the partial prompt must be 2 choices or 2 things that either one would be acceptable. So in this situation, it's, do you want pretzels or goldfish? You've got pretzels, you've got goldfish. The student likes pretzels, they like goldfish. They're 2 good choices. So whichever one they choose, it's a viable response. Also think about if you were targeting a greeting in the morning and you had to get to provide a partial prompt. The partial prompt wouldn't be, do you want to say hello or goodbye? Because those are 2 opposites. You would maybe, the partial prompt would be, do you want to say hello or good morning? Right? And you're going to have a communication board that you're pointing to be able to give them the opportunity to then figure out what it is they want to say. I'm going to skip 3B because if then you pause, you're going to provide a full model. and you're going to go to the communication board or the communication device, and you're going to model for them. You could say, I want goldfish or want goldfish. And then finally, when you get a response, whether it's at step 1, step 2, 3, so on and so forth, you want to give descriptive feedback. Our favorite feedback in the school district, and I think in all school districts across the United States, is good job. And we have to be more descriptive than that when we're talking to students, because they've just said something to us and we need to respond to what they say. So we need to repeat what they say in the way in which they did it. So if they pointed to a picture symbol or they pointed to the object, we need to say, you said goldfish. Then we're going to expand what they said and add another word. So I can say, want goldfish. And then I can put it together grammatically and say, I want goldfish. So they hear the whole thing. So it's descriptive feedback is really important combined with doing this least to most prompt hierarchy and adding that pause into everything that you do. I'm going to go to the next slide. Yes, it goes more into descriptive feedback, but I want to give Rhonda an opportunity to share.
I just think descriptive feedback is crucial because the student is learning a lot of those core symbols we've already said are abstract. So whatever they've indicated either on a communication board or their device, by giving them that descriptive feedback, you're validating their message. You're telling them, I heard you, you communicated to me, you said something to me. And that makes them feel good because you're staying with them and giving them that time to respond. And then when they do say something, you're giving them that reinforcement that, yes, you heard them. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that this may feel awkward. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, this is kind of redundant. Why would I repeat what they said? But I want you to think that naturally when we have conversations with our friends, it happens all the time. If you say to someone, what did you do on the weekend? And they say, I went to the movies. Sometimes we're going to say, you went to the movies? What did we just do? We repeated what they told us, but we did that because we're kind of conversationally saying, well, I heard what you said. I want you to expand on it. So think of it that way, not as an awkward extra thing we're doing with a student who's AAC, but actually it's a conversational strategy that we all use. We just don't realize we use it. So I think if you think of it in those terms, it's a very natural conversational strategy to keep a conversation and an interaction going. Then it becomes more natural and something that we all need. We need to know that someone we're talking to is listening to what we're saying, and sometimes we just do that to keep that interaction going. And that's what these kids need 10 times more than we do when we're having a conversation with our friends or family.
And two, and I know everybody gets really excited, especially when that student, maybe for the first time or puts together a couple of words or uses their communication device, and then everybody in the room goes, yay, so good. Well, that is not the normal response that we give to people when they're talking. And I know everyone gets really excited and wants to clap or say, oh, that's such a good job. But communicating isn't a good job in that sense. So they didn't just clean up all of their snack foods and put it in the garbage, which could be a good job, right? But even that I'd give descriptive feedback to. Thank you for throwing away all of your garbage into the garbage pail, right? So it's important to give descriptive feedback in any sense, but we really do not ever say to people that we're having a conversation with, and I did this to one of my favorite teachers because she loved to say, good job. And whenever I would be in the room, she'd like, oh, Colleen, I said good job again, didn't I? So one day after school, I go, so what did you do this weekend? And she told me all about it. I go, oh, good job. And then I asked her another question. She told me, like, oh, good job. And I kind of made it sound like it fit with, finally she looked at me and she goes, all right, just stop it. Because she saw that that's not how you respond to people. You do respond more naturally. And I know, like Rhonda said, it feels like, why am I repeating this? But just watching Rhonda do it, it seems so natural to me. And I could imagine all the times that I do that with people. So descriptive feedback is very important. I also think about when we do the ECT year-long workshop, part of the workshop is to videotape yourself doing these different type of activities that you learn during ECT. And our recordings are always, how good are they? We don't have super cameramen. We're usually using an iPad or a phone or something to get the recording. So the audio isn't always great. But I always know what the kid says if the teacher gives good descriptive feedback. Otherwise, a lot of times if they have a device or if they're pointing to a board, I have no idea what the kid just said. If the teacher doesn't, or the SLP, the adult, doesn't give good descriptive feedback. So I think that just kind of reinforces the fact that I have no idea what they're talking about when I watch it back on video, unless the teacher says something like, oh, you said big. That is a big elephant. So it gives that student more information about what they're talking about. So we have a list of AT resources here. We want you to know that we do have a YouTube channel, and there's different ways you can get it, but if you simply put in the search, Palm Beach County School District, PBCSD, AT Team ESE, you'll be able to find our channel. Please subscribe to it. There's a lot of different things that you can see on our YouTube channel. We have board maker instructional videos, touch chat instructional videos. We have these type of videos that you're watching right now about aided language stimulation, the prompt hierarchy, where we might do them in smaller segments. So if you as an SLP are wanting to share this with your teachers or paraprofessionals or other staff that are working with students, and you don't want to have an hour presentation that they're watching, we do have shorter presentations that get into all of these different materials that or subject areas that we're talking about. We also have on the YouTube channel videos of how to do different types of aided language stimulation through showing you storybooks and things like that. So there's a lot of different things on the YouTube channel. We also have an assistive technology AT Google Classroom, and there's the code to get in. If you forget the code or you're not writing it down quick enough, you can always just email your AT specialist and we can invite you to the classroom. There are communication boards there. There are adapted stories that are there. There's just a lot of materials under the classwork tab in AT Google Classroom. We also have an adapted book kit library. I want to say that we are close to 100 different titles of books from the literature, that we have the real book, and we have other books that we have adapted that have something to do with that book, and worksheets and recipes, all different types of things that can come in a kit that you can receive through the Pony. And you can use that kit for up to 3 weeks, then you send it back to us. So we do have an adapted book kit library. Also, ESE SharePoint, that's something that you can get from your portal, and you would go to the AT tile, and there are resources there as well. Most of those resources are in the AT Google Classroom, but depending on what's easiest for you to access, we wanted you to have different ways to get to those AT resources. We also wanted, again, to have our list of AT specialists, and here they are again. So if you want to, quickly take a look. If you're in the north area, it's either going to be Andy Lang or Jen Dotson. If it's the central west area, it's either going to be Jamie Nisley or Tina Murphy. And in the south area, it's either going to be Gina or Rhonda. I'm covering Royal Palm School, Woodlands, Banyan, Santa Lucia's, and then I'm doing the year-long training. So if you're really interested in finding out more about MELD or ECT, you can email me directly about that. As I said, we have our groups ready for this year, but if you want to participate next year, feel free to email me and I'll put you on our list for next year so we contact you about that. I wanted just to have a quick recap. We talked about the definitions of AAC, our user population, universal versus prescriptive. You took a quick look at AAC Materials and Devices, and we discussed how to integrate AAC into the classroom. We talked about aided language stimulation and core versus fringe, and also our prompt hierarchy. So we talked about a number of things today, really kind of a loaded hour with a lot of information. Your AT specialist is happy to support you in your classroom, especially if you're new to this field of talking about AAC. They're more than happy to come out and talk to you about it and give you ideas of how you can incorporate it into your classrooms or therapy sessions. And we're getting close. I think we're about at the thank you. So I'm going to go back up to that slide so you have that one while we're finishing up what we're talking about. And Rhonda, I wanted you to be able to weigh in on anything we've talked about in the last few slides.
Thank you. I think one of the most important messages that we can give you today is that we are here as AT specialists to support you. Please reach out to us. The first thing you can do is email. And even if you don't know your specific AT specialist, if you email someone you remember Colleen's name. If you email Colleen, she will get you in contact with the person who's assigned to your school. That's the first step, because I don't like sometimes when someone who maybe has students who are not speaking for any reason, it could be apraxia or cognitive deficits or ASD, and then it gets to February, March of the school year, and they're still not sure what to do. If you have a student who is not functionally verbal or non-speaking, and you want some assistance and some support, reach out as soon as you can, because we can get you started, we can help you along, and so that that student is getting the benefit of AAC support so much earlier. So don't hesitate. We're happy to help, and I think that's one message I really wanted to hammer home today, is to contact us. We're more than willing to come out and help you. And Google Meet, if you're not comfortable with us being in a face-to-face meeting this year, support you in any way that we can. Thank you.
So that is going to conclude our presentation, and I'm going to desperately look for the stop recording button, which is so interesting because they keep changing Google Meet on us, so we have to check everything out. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We really appreciated you listening to us, and we hope that we can help you in the future with any students that need AAC. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.